Today's show is all about a review of the PSB Speakers Passive 50. Yeah, it commemorates the company's 50th anniversary. That's pretty spectacular. Now, the speaker itself, the Passive 50, is a two-way design with a 1-inch titanium dome set into a shallow waveguide, and then across the front baffle where the tweeter lives, there is a felt pad to minimize diffraction off the front baffle. Below the tweeter is a 6.5-inch paper woofer, mid-woofer, and that it has an aluminum basket, by the way, in case you care about such things. And then below the woofer is an 8-inch passive radiator, paper driver, aluminum basket. Now the cabinet itself, by the way, is walnut, real walnut over MDF. It's beautifully done, heavily braced. It feels incredibly solid. It is a stand mount speaker. Well, it's kind of like a really big stand mount speaker that sits on a very short stand, or you could sort of think of it as a tower speaker. The stand, by the way, is included with the speaker. It's a 6-ohm design, drops down to 4 ohms. So yes, you would want to use an amplifier that's happy driving 4-ohm speakers. It's interesting that in 1999, PSB started building speakers in China. They'd always designed them in Canada, but they started building some models in China in 1999. That's a long time ago, and they have developed very close relationships with the people that are building their speakers in China. They have some employees in their factory in China. So it's very tightly controlled, very quality control oriented relationship between PSB and Canada and their factories in China. You know, being a retro design, because it is a retro design, because it's based on the Passive 2 that came out in 1974. I really like the cloth grille. It just, you know, it's part of that retro look, kind of like, well, let's say the Mission 770 is in the retro league, and the KLH Model 5, and the JBL Classic L100. They're all kind of harkening back to the 70s, and so is this speaker. And that cloth grille looks fantastic. I think the whole design is actually rather elegant. It is retro, but it does seem sleek and modern in its own way. Around back there's a set of bi-wire binding posts, gold-plated binding posts. Now the price is $2,499 a pair. They sell direct from PSB in Canada, but also through brick-and-mortar dealers. I'm a little confused about their 60-day return policy. I think that's when you buy direct from PSB, but I could be wrong about that. For some comparison speakers, what I had on hand was the MoFi SourcePoint 10 that I just reviewed, and also the Zu DW6, the Dirty Weekend 6. Now, setup was pretty straight ahead. I used just a tiny bit of toe-in with the speakers. I was sitting about 9 feet away, and they were about 8 feet apart from each other. My primary amplifier for this review was the Hagel H95 integrated amp, which I will be reviewing shortly, and also my reference system with the PassLabs XP30 preamp, PassLabs XA25 power amp. The DAC was the Mola Tambaki, and the CD player, CD transport, was the Jay's Audio CD transport. So if you really want to know the background, the details of the design in depth, check out my interview with Paul Barton. It's on my podcast, the Audiophiliac podcast, which is linked directly below this video. So I have to mention this, that during the interview, we did not talk a lot about Paul Barton's design process that involves using blind testing. Yeah, he does blind tests of the product he's reviewing compared to other speakers with a panel of listeners and himself. So that's pretty interesting. His process has been honed over these 50 years of designing speakers, and that's an integral part of how he designs speakers. And yes, there will be an Audiophiliac viewer system of the day later on in the show. When I started listening to the Passive 50, my first reaction was that I felt comfortable. It's a very inviting sound. It put me at ease. Yeah. And I think that was true because the mid-range is so relaxed and beautiful sounding. It's not jumping at you or anything. The high-end was nice, sweet, relaxed. Bass was very satisfying for a speaker of this size with a 6.5-inch woofer. But it was that relaxed quality that really got this thing going, working on this review. Because this comes on the heels of doing the SourcePoint 10, the MoFi SourcePoint 10, which has a lot of things going for it, but it is not a relaxing speaker. It's a very exciting and vivid sounding speaker. And this one, by contrast, was mellower and sweeter sounding. My listening sessions started in earnest, because I always have it on in background before I really sit down and listen, just streaming whatever. But when I really started listening, it was Duke Ellington's Columbia recordings from the late 50s, early 60s and stuff. And the brass just had that sound, you know, not too much bite, not too aggressive, but certainly it popped. And the spaces between the musicians was very well defined. The bottom end, again, was satisfying, not super deep. If you're into deep, deep bass, yeah, you're going to want to use a subwoofer, but that's true for any speaker of this size. As I said, this is a relaxing sounding speaker, but not so much that it's going to hide the flaws of really bad recordings. And the thing is, I've been in Liza Minnelli mode lately. What a singer, what a powerhouse she was. And I'm playing the movie score to New York, New York. She starred in this movie. It's Martin Scorsese. Robert De Niro was the co-star. It's not great Scorsese film, but it does have some good music in it. But I'm playing the soundtrack recording, and yeah, she's good, but the overall sound of the record is kind of shrill and compressed and aggressive sounding. Not a fun ride. And the speaker, the Passif 50, didn't exactly hide the flaws. It made it semi-tolerable to listen to. Well, let's say really listen as opposed to have as background. So yeah, it's going to tell you what's in the recording, but most of the time, most of the music I played, I was perfectly happy with the sound coming out of the speaker. It is, for people who complain about speakers that are too bright and too aggressive, this speaker, the Passif 50, is definitely worth considering. So my first comparison speaker was this one, the MoFi SourcePoint 10 that I just reviewed recently. And that one, and the music I was playing for most of this comparison was Wilco. It's a live album. It's live. It's exciting. And I'm playing the Passif 50, and it was good. It was good. Jeff Tweedy's voice was phenomenal. The band is kicking ass. It's a fun record. I love Wilco. It's one of my favorite bands. Anyway, so I'm getting used to the sound over the Passif 50. Then I switched over to the SourcePoint 10. And first thing is, it's a more vivid, brighter sounding speaker. I hate to use that word tipped up, but let's go with tipped up. The guitars popped more. The rawness of the electric guitars was rawer over the SourcePoint 10. So, and returning back to the Passif 50, it was more laid back and mellow. It depends on, again, this is what you want out of your music. I think the Passif 50 is a more even tempered sound, you know, as you go from one record to the next. It has more of a sameness to the sound, and I think the SourcePoint 10 really highlights the difference in the sound, but sometimes you may not want that much revealed about the music you're listening to. So it gets a little tricky as to which one is better. I am not going to say which one is better. I'm going to describe how they sounded different. And I think that the Passif 50, it's mid-range, I'm a mid-range guy, is just more, there's more substance to the mid-range. It feels more complete. The SourcePoint 10 by comparison was crisper, more upfront, a more forward sound than the Passif 50. The SourcePoint 10's imaging is so, well, precise and focused and just spot on. And by comparison, the Passif 50 is a little softer around the edges. And also the SourcePoint 10's bass, because it does have a 10-inch driver, goes deeper and has more impact. It is more dynamically alive. Those are all really good things. But then returning to the Passif 50 after listening to the SourcePoint 10, it felt more, let's just say, comfortable. That ease just drew me in on that level. So it kind of depends what you're looking for with a speaker. Now, the next comparison speaker was the Zu DW6, the Dirty Weekend 6. It's a bigger speaker. It's a floor-standing speaker. So again, the bass impact and power on the Zu was better than the Passif 50. But the Passive 50, in this case, is a far more neutral sounding speaker. The Zu has peaks and dips. It's more exciting and vivid, but there's places where you feel like it's missing out. There's some like mid-range sounds much thinner compared to the Passive 50. But for rock music or any kind of music with dynamics and punch, yeah, the Zu does a better job at that. It does. But again, returning to the Passive 50, it's just that balance is so dialed in by Paul Barton. I think that's, so when you take it as a whole thing, right? What is the Passive 50? It's a well thought out, well engineered design that's designed to be neutral. So I listened to this Bob Marley record one early afternoon, and it was one of those, I just put on the record, this is the LP version actually, I put on the record, started listening, No Woman, No Cry, with my eyes closed. I wasn't going to take notes at this point, and I just let the music wash over me. And I played it pretty loud, let's say about 90 dB level, loud for me. And I was thinking, this speaker just does it for me. It just sounds right. Yes, the SourcePoint is more precise and the imaging is sharper focused, and the Zu Dirty Weekend is more dynamically alive and more powerful sounding. But this one, this is like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but this one, it just seems more even overall. So that's kind of it. This is kind of, so Steve, what do you really think? That is, I'll do it in reverse. So that is really what this speaker is and how it works for me. It just sounds right. Other speakers do other things better, but that is always the case with every speaker that you review. There's always other speakers to do different things. And this is the way this one strikes me. It's just an easy speaker to listen to. It gives you a lot of detail, a lot of clarity, but it's that ease that just draws me in. So that's what we got. So now we can say, yes, let's do it. The Audiophiliac viewer system of the day. Okay, so this beautiful picture was sent to us from Stephen. He lives in Bangkok, Thailand. And he points out that every single piece in his system was bought in Asia, and none of it was in working order. So he did almost all of the restoration and upgrades himself. Now the speakers are original Klipsch Fortes, and they were upgraded with Bob Kreitz crossovers and tweeters. The preamp is a Marantz 2270. The power amp is a Macintosh MC225. Turntable, Technics 1200 Mark II. And finally, the credenza is Clausen and Son. That's 1960s Danish mid-century modern. Beautiful. Thank you, Stephen. All right, we are back. My name is Steve Guttenberg, and I am definitely the Audiophiliac, and I'm so glad you're here. If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, please consider joining my Patreon. The address is on the screen right now, and the link is below in the description. You can join for a couple of dollars a month, up to $100 a month, and at the higher tiers, you and I will have a conversation every month at the beginning of the month. And it's great. I say this all the time, but it's true. I love talking to the people who watch my show. And the Audiophiliac podcast is back. I'm putting up new content, original content, like the interview with Paul Barton, but I'm also putting up audio-only versions of recent episodes, so you can listen while you're driving or cooking or sleeping, whatever you do. It's there, and you can hear it on Apple Podcasts. You can hear it on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, all the usual suspects for podcast listening. So check that out. I'm really glad I figured out how to get it back in gear. You could also like the episodes. It's really important to the algorithm. Please hit the like button when any episodes that you like of mine. And also consider subscribing. We now hit 225,000 subscribers from all over the world that watch this channel. That is phenomenal. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're subscribing or if you have yet to subscribe, hey, we got plenty of room. Please hit the subscribe button. And when you do, hit the notification bell so you will be notified every time there's an incredible new episode. And with that, I can say my work here is at last complete. Again, thanks for watching, and I really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.